I am personally inspired by Noah's relentless faith. He believed that God was who he said he was and that he would do what he said he would do. We're in a great series about what it is to flourish as an olive tree. And today, we're going to look at the olive branch and we're going to learn about the faithfulness of God and the patience of Noah and the power of peace and reconciliation. Listen, I've got no doubt that every single one of us watching this broadcast today could use just a little bit more peace in our lives. And also that we could be used by God to be agents of peacemaking within our spheres of influence. So what we're going to do is we're going to unpack Genesis chapter 8 today. But just before we dive in, I want to bring you up to speed with what's been happening leading up to where we're going to start in Genesis 8. So we're going to start off with some intense passages of scripture, but I want you to hang in there with me. Put that remote control down because this is going to be good and you're going to be so grateful that you stuck with it. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 5 to 6, we find out that God saw the human wickedness was widespread on the earth and that every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time. And so the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was deeply grieved. In verse 11, we see that the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and that the earth was filled with wickedness. So God chose to send a flood, which would wipe out everything and everyone except for one man, Noah and his family. So God chose to spare Noah and his family because Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God. Because God was going to send a flood, he commanded Noah to build an ark, which is what would save him and his family. And this building project took 120 years. During those 120 years, Noah preached righteousness, but listen to this, not one single person heeded his call because the world was so full of wickedness and evil and iniquity. So now God was about to execute his righteous judgment upon the world. So in Genesis chapter 7, God told Noah to enter the ark with his wife, their 3 sons and their wives, as well as 7 pairs of every clean animal and type of bird, and 1 pair, as well as 2 of every other animal, 1 male and 1 female. Now, after they entered the ark, God shut them in on the ark, and the rain and the flood, it was so intense that the Bible tells us that all of the mountains under the whole sky were covered by water, and that every living thing that was on the face of the earth was wiped out. Okay, so now you've just had a quick history lesson, quick backdrop as we pick up in Genesis chapter 8. God remembered Noah as well as all the wildlife and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. God caused a wind to pass over the earth and the water began to subside. The sources of the watery depths and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky stopped. The water steadily receded from the earth, and by the end of 150 days, the water had decreased significantly. The ark came to rest in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month on the mountains of Ararat. The water continued to recede until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains were visible. After 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made, and he sent out a raven. It went back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see whether the water on the earth's surface had gone down. But the dove found no resting place for its foot. It returned to him in the ark because water covered the surface of the whole earth. He reached out and brought it into the ark to himself. So Noah waited 7 more days and sent out the dove from the ark again. When the dove came to him at evening, there was a plucked olive leaf in its beak. So Noah knew that the water on the earth's surface had gone down. After he had waited another 7 days, he sent out the dove, but it did not return to him again. In the 601st year, in the 1st month, on the 1st day of the month, the water that had covered the earth was dried up. Then Noah removed the ark's cover and saw that the surface of the ground was dying. By the 27th day of the 2nd month, the earth was dry. Then God spoke to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out all the living creatures that are with you, birds, livestock, those that crawl on the earth, and those that will spread over the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth." So Noah, along with his sons and wife and his sons' wives, came out. All the animals, all the creatures that crawl, and all the flying creatures, everything that moves on the earth came out of the ark by their families. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some of every kind of clean animal and every kind of clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. When the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, he said to himself, "I will never again curse the ground because of human beings, even though the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth onward. And I will never again strike down every living thing as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night will not cease." This is the word of the Lord. The chapter opens with 3 beautiful words that are full of mercy and grace. God remembered Noah. This signifies a new beginning, and it gives us a renewed hope for the future. Now, when we read that God remembered Noah, it doesn't mean that God actually never forgot him. It's not as if God suddenly thought to himself, oh no, I forgot that Noah and his family and all those animals were out there in the ark. God has never forgotten anything, nor can he ever forget anything. He knows everything immediately, comprehensively, perfectly, and eternally. God had not lost track of them, but he remembered them in the sense that he had made a promise in chapter 6, verse 18, to establish his covenant with Noah, and he was about to act on that promise. I'm certain that Noah was relieved that God had remembered him, because I can't even imagine what it must have been like to be on that ark with all of those animals and the smells that go with it. Then just try and imagine the seasickness, the claustrophobia, the sound of those waves pounding against the ark, and the chilling noise of the winds blowing while they were stuck in total darkness. I wonder how they washed or prepared food. Where did they go to the bathroom? What did they do for entertainment? What did they talk about? What did they dream about? I mean, there was no internet, there was no TV or food delivery. Can you even imagine the cabin fever? Surely Noah might have had the thought that God had forgotten them. He must have wondered if they would ever be free to disembark and walk outside again. I mean, I've got so many questions for Noah. Of course, Noah was a man of faith, but there's no doubt his faith would have taken some kind of battering on that ark. I mean, the text does not give us any insight into the emotional or the psychological condition of Noah. But I have to wonder whether he felt abandoned, even though God had told him to build the ark so the ark would be used to save him in the flood. You can know one thing with your head and still feel a totally different thing in your heart, can't you? Remember, at this point, he had already been confined in the ark for over 5 months, and he still has no idea how long this whole ordeal is going to last. I think we've all been there in different ways, haven't we? We've done what we believed God was asking us to do. We were obedient to the best of our capacity. We were convinced that God was with us and for us, and then we were battered and bruised by the storms of life and ended up wondering, God, have you forgotten me? The good news is that God had not forgotten Noah. God knew exactly where he was, and God called the winds to blow, the waters to subside, and the rain to stop. God was in control even when things may have felt out of control. It's such a comfort for me to know that God knows exactly where we are at all times, no matter how chaotic things may feel, no matter how alone we may feel. He's promised to never leave us nor forsake us. In Deuteronomy 31 verse 8 and Hebrews 13:5, we are assured that God will never leave us. I want to remind you today that God has not forgotten you. He knows that relational challenge that you're facing. He knows that financial battle that you're fighting. He knows that heartbreak you've experienced. He knows that disappointment you're feeling. He knows that promotion that didn't come through, or the loss you've just experienced, or the healing that you're believing for. He has not forgotten you. He sees you. He knows. He cares. Never forget that if it matters to you, it matters to God. God's not distant or aloof or disinterested in your life. He knows the number of hairs on your head and every single detail about you. He remembers you and he loves you. God remembered Noah. When God sent the flood, he addressed the wrong and the sin in the world for what it was head on. He didn't call it something else. He didn't pretend it wasn't as bad as it was. He judged it righteously and removed a barrier to people having a right relationship with him, a widespread wickedness that was only spurring people on to run further and further away from him. And once he did that, what did he do next? Did he continue to flood the earth endlessly? No. He caused the wind to pass over the water so that the water, which had now become a barrier to his original design, was removed. Peace not only has a perspective, peace has a practice. It removes barriers between us and others. But peace doesn't stop there. Being anything but passive, it goes even further in its pursuit. Have you ever thought what it was like to be Noah? Even after it stopped raining, the waters recede gradually. In fact, when all was said and done, they were in the ark for just over a year. Even after the rain stopped, they had to wait for months on end before the land was dry and God told them to disembark. I would imagine that Noah and his family and the animals were eager to get off that ark when the rain stopped. But they were going to have to exercise patience and wait on the perfect timing of God. Noah had to trust that God was at work when he could not see or hear anything. In verse 7, we read that Noah sent a raven out to see if the water had receded, but to no avail. He then sent out a dove that returned the first time because the waters were still covered the earth. And then 7 days later, Noah sent out the dove again. Then we read in verse 11 that when the dove came to him at evening, there was a plucked olive leaf in its beak. So Noah knew that the water on the earth's surface had gone down. Of course, this is the key verse for us in the context of this series that we're doing, because it was the olive leaf in the mouth of the dove that convinced Noah that the water had receded. Remember, the greatest calamity to strike the earth has now passed. God has judged sin, and now Noah's family and the animals on board the ark will set about to repopulate the earth. Now, God could have sent the dove back with a lot of things. A dried out dead branch, a rock. Those two would have told Noah that the water had receded, that dry ground was emerging. But they wouldn't have been much of a picture of hope or of restoration. Now, of course, since then, the olive branch has become a powerful symbol of peace and reconciliation in the church and in many other sectors of society. In fact, to hold out an olive branch is a saying that comes from Genesis 8:11. Today, it means that you've done or said something to show that you want to end a disagreement with someone. To hold out an olive branch, it's a great thing to do because it means that you're offering peace and that you want to end the disagreement and move forward with forgiving that person. Can I just say, in a world full of divisiveness and strife and arguments and contentions and bitterness and unforgiveness, I think it's a powerful witness to the world around us when we Jesus followers choose to hold out an olive branch to other people. We're called to be peacemakers in this world. I wonder if there's any fractured relationship in your life today that could begin the process of healing if you were willing to hold out an olive branch to someone. I encourage you to take this seriously and ask God to give you the strength and the courage to hold out that olive branch. We live in a world full of such chaos and division and arguing and strife. And I know that every one of us could certainly use a little more peace in our lives. And we could also be used by God to be agents of peace to those around us in our world. Peacemaking may be one of the most important skills we need to learn in order to be effective witnesses for Christ in this volatile, anxious, and anything but peaceful world. You and I are called to be peacemakers. So, well, can you imagine how Noah felt when he took the cover off the ark and he saw that the surface of the ground was drying? I mean, he must have been beside himself. Noah had been waiting for over a year in a confined space under traumatic conditions to see the faithfulness of God come to pass. Noah had built the ark by faith. Remember that when he started the building project, he didn't even know what an ark was, and he had never seen rain before. He entered the ark by faith, not knowing how long he would have to remain inside. Then he remained in the ark by faith, waiting until God had given him the green light to exit. No wonder we read in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, by faith, Noah, after he was warned about what was not yet seen and motivated by godly fear, built an ark to deliver his family. By faith, he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. I am personally inspired by Noah's relentless faith. He believed that God was who he said he was and that he would do what he said he would do. He was a man who walked by faith and not by sight. And I want to remind each and every one of us today that we too are a people of faith. We are called to live by faith. We are called to walk by faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So let's be a people of faith that step up and into the purposes of God, and let's be peacemakers in our day and age. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments, and if you feel led, please share this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks so much for watching.